नमस्कार दोस्तों। सबसे पहले तो मैं देश के पूर्व प्रधानमंत्री, हम सब के नेता आदरणीय डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी का, देश के पूर्व वित्त मंत्री आदरणीय श्री पी चिदम्बरम जी का अखिल भारतीय कांग्रेस कमेटी के प्रांगण में स्वागत करता हूं और मेरे सहयोगी राजीव गौड़ा जी और उनके सारी टीम का, जिन्होंने एक महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दिया है। आज हम सब आपके सामने भारतीय अर्थव्यवस्था की मौजूदा असेसमेंट को लेकर शामिल हुए हैं। रियल स्टेट ऑफ इकोनॉमी 2017 ये दिखाएगा कि मोदी जी का नेतृत्व, नीति और नियत तीनों कैसे देश के लिए हानिकारक हैं। और कुछ कहे बगैर मैं आदरणीय डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी और चिदम्बरम साहब से दरख्वास्त करूंगा कि सबसे पहले इस रियल स्टेट ऑफ इकोनॉमी डॉक्यूमेंट को अनवील करें जो एआईसीसी रिसर्च और कोऑर्डिनेशन डिपार्टमेंट ने बनाया है। शुक्रिया दोस्तों। इसकी सॉफ्ट कॉपीज़ हम आप सबकी ईमेल्स पर भेज रहे हैं और मैं अब अनुरोध करूंगा आदरणीय डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी से कि वो चंद शब्द देश की अर्थव्यवस्था और इस कागजात के बारे में कहें।
चिदम्बरम जी, सुरजेवाला जी, राजीव गौड़ा जी, dear brothers and sisters, tomorrow is the day when the government will present its economic survey. We thought it is a good idea that we should also bring out a document which sets out in what we consider as a real dose of realism, and so that the country as a whole has ways and means of finding or assessing where the economy is, where it is going, and what it needs to be done to set it on the right path. That the Indian economy is not in good shape is now obvious. Even the International Monetary Fund has projected that the growth rate of India in this current fiscal year will not be 7.6%, but less than that, 6.6%. There are several other rating agencies have also made similar projections. I would not like to comment on these projections. It is for you, ladies and gentlemen of the press, to find ways and means of assessing where the truth is. And therefore, this is a document, this is a contribution to the ongoing debate in our country, where our economy is, where is it going, and what needs to be done to put it on the right path. Thank you.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया डॉक्टर साहब का। मैं अब दरख्वास्त करूंगा श्री पी चिदम्बरम जी से कि वो इस स्टेट ऑफ इकोनॉमी डॉक्यूमेंट और देश की अर्थव्यवस्था के बारे में आपको बताएंगे।
Dr. Manmohan Singh ji, Shri Rajiv Gowda, Member of Parliament, Shri Randeep Surjewala, friends. The document that we have just unveiled is an important contribution to the debate in a democracy. Let me begin by complimenting my dear colleague Shri Rajiv Gowda and his team at the AICC Research and Coordination Department for producing a document that would be worthy of any economics department of a major university. It's a document which candidly, truthfully, and realistically assesses the state of India's economy. It is supported by hard research, it's supported by data, and it's supported by comments on the economy by eminent economists. As Dr. Manmohan Singh ji just said, the state of India's economy is not something that we can be happy about. The UPA delivered an average of 8.5% growth in the first 5 years. In 2008, the world and India faced a major international financial crisis. Yet, over a 10-year period, UPA delivered average growth of 7.5%. We lifted 140 million people out of poverty. I think these two achievements are achievements which any government must try to emulate and, if possible, exceed. I have no doubt that every government wants to match these achievements, and I wish the NDA government very well. We wish them well in 2014. We wish them well again, that they should try to exceed the record of growth in the UPA government. They are hiding behind a dazzle of a number called the GDP. That number has been increasingly questioned. It's been questioned on the basis that the base year has been changed. It has been questioned on the wrong choice of deflators, but I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty of that number. But the people of India are not dazzled by that number. People of India are asking hard questions. The first and most important question is, where are the jobs? The second question is, where is new capital investment? And the third question is, how are businesses being helped to grow and expand and employ more people? Therefore, I would urge you to read through this report and go behind the dazzle of a number and ask yourself questions like, what is the gross fixed capital formation? The numbers will tell you it has declined over the last 2 years. Ask yourself the question, where are the jobs? You will get the very discouraging answer that in the month of July, August, and September 2016, only 77,000 jobs were created in this country, out of which about 50,000 were in the government sector. That is the figure released by the Labour Bureau 3 days ago. Ask yourself, where is credit growth? And you will get the answer that credit growth today, around 5%, is the lowest in several decades. So there are no jobs, capital formation is declining, credit growth is the lowest in several decades, and yet, if the government presents tomorrow a very rosy picture of the economy, I think people of India are entitled to seriously question that conclusion. Every government must be optimistic, but optimism must stem from a realistic assessment of the situation. The NDA government tends to believe an exaggerated version, an exaggerated picture of the economy. This research document brings out the truth. This is closer to the truth than I believe what the government will say tomorrow. So I once again commend Mr. Rajiv Gowda and I urge you to read through this report and take the message through the media to the people of India. Thank you.
May I now request Rajiv ji to make his comments as also show a brief PowerPoint presentation on the state of economy.
Thank you, Randy Bhai. Respected Dr. Manmohan Singh, respected Sri P. Chidambaram, and friends. When we decided to embark on this exercise, we said we must, as a responsible opposition, present a factual assessment of what's going on in the economy, what has been going on in the last 2.5 years. We hope to start a new institution where every year, before the government's economic survey comes out, we, as the principal opposition party, will come out with our version, which we believe is the actual representation, which will avoid which will actually highlight what the government may avoid wanting to want to share in terms of the actual functioning of the economy. We hope that this tradition will be carried forward by other parties when we are back in power. Now, coming to the actual real state of the economy, I'd like to go through a very quick PPT. I mean, the presentation is in about 10 chapters. It's a very, very detailed, data-driven analysis of what's going on. I will just take you through the highlights in a small narrative. Is it on? Okay, go ahead. So we normally talk about a fiscal deficit. We talk about a current account deficit. But the most crucial deficit facing India is the job deficit. Every year, we have crores of youngsters entering the job market. And the real challenge for us is, how are we going to get them jobs? Give them a chance, empower them to create jobs for themselves as well. Next. Prime Minister Modi, during his campaign, the BJP, during its campaign, talked about providing a job to every single youth. The job promises were of the order of 2 crore jobs a year. Now, that is a tall order. But in 2010, we had 11 lakh new jobs created. From then to 2016, we have seen a dramatic decrease, especially since the new government took over. And in the last year, we have an abysmal 1.5 lakh new jobs created. Where is 1.5 lakh jobs? Where is the talk of 2 crore jobs? So if you want to create jobs, we need investment. As Chidambaramji pointed out, there is investment that needs to come, needs to be gross fixed capital formation, etc. Investment comes in multiple forms. There is public investment, for example, in infrastructure. And what we have seen, again, there's been talk about tremendous investment in highways, talk about high, rapid pace of growth there. There's been talk about investment in railway infrastructure. Next. Okay. But if you actually see how many projects, road infrastructure projects were sanctioned and how many were actually initiated and completed, you see a big gap between the expectation and the reality. Mr. Gadkari also has been talking about growing roads at a very, very rapid pace, but the reality turns out to be about 6 kilometers a day or something like that. Next. When we come to railways, instead of investing significantly in safety, we are seeing talks about bullet trains, etc. And the sad reality is an extraordinarily large number of derailments that have taken place and cost people's lives this very year, one of the highest on record. This is a result of misplaced priorities and not implementing various reports that have been created, Kakodkar Committee and others on railway safety, which are urgently needed to be implemented. Next. What about private investment? As Sri Chidambaram pointed out, it has been going down tremendously, and you can see the slide there that just shows in the last couple of years it's been abysmal. Credit growth is very, very low, at a very significant low, and gross fixed capital formation is also very, very as bottoming out. If you look at projects, how many are stalled? Projects continue to be stalled both in the government and in the private sector, and this is not something that is that gives us any hope. The new investment proposals, which are just an indication of the interest of investors to go forward, they have been dropping substantially in the last 2 years. There was all this talk about Startup India, that the government will set up a fund that will invest in startups and generate, as a result, crores of jobs for a large number of youngsters. But the sad reality is that just in the last year, a large number of startups have actually closed shop, and the dream, which must be nurtured and supported, but that dream is very different from the actual reality of Startup India. Next. The other crucial investment, not just public and private, but you need investment in people, in human capital. What is this government doing on the front of health, education, and skilling? If you look at one aspect of health, the flagship program of Swachh Bharat mission, if you look at the amount that should be spent in order to achieve those goals, a fraction of what should be spent, what has been allocated, is actually being spent on the ground. So if you are not even able to go out there and put in the toilet infrastructure, imagine how much more difficult it is to get the behavioral changes going. So this crucial dimension of health, the ending of open defecation, is still very, very far from being realized. Next. If you look at other kinds of investments, investments in education, in the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan is tapering out, and you are seeing the impact in terms of enrollment rates and other results from the school system. Going to the larger picture, we need to look at what's going on in the macroeconomy. Even before demonetization, we saw that the Central Statistical Organization had predicted that the economy's growth rate had come down to 7.1%. Remember, these are all the new numbers. If you go by the old method of calculation of the GDP, this would be back in the 5% range. So the economy has not been doing particularly well in the last couple of years, and the calculation, of course, suggests a 7.1, but the felt reality of people's lived experience is something quite different. Next. The rupee has been weakening. Next. Exports have been stagnant, and that is a real worry. And this, by the way, exports have not been stagnant for countries like Vietnam and others who are also competing with us in the global marketplace. So it's not just a question of international global conditions being a little slow. It's a question of how well we can compete in terms of our own exports. At a time like this, when the economy was weakening, when macroeconomic indicators were not favorable, we end up with demonetization. And we have Dr. Manmohan Singh, who spoke in Parliament very eloquently and pointed out that this was a monumental blunder, that this was going to have a significant impact on the poor and the vulnerable and the rural populations, and that it is going to slow down the economy by a minimum of 2%. Okay. Now, demonetization has clearly hit GDP growth prospects, and a range of experts from different organizations have come up with predictions of slowdown. And in addition to the ones I'm showing you, Dr. Singh has mentioned the IMF, which again is a neutral observer of the Indian economy, and it says at least 1% slowdown is to be expected. But the bigger worry is a very credible organization like the Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy argues that The slowdown is not going to be in a matter of a couple of quarters or the next fiscal year. It is actually going to last for 4 or 5 years into the next government, because that is the kind of slowdown, that is the kind of discouragement that you've seen to economic activity. And that is something that really worries us. And when you look at who is hurt most, we are looking at rural India. And just a couple of the figures are the sales of tractors and the sales of two-wheelers, which have dramatically dropped in the month of December. Next. Then, of course, if the government wants to raise money and spend on investment, is the government doing this in the right manner? What do we mean by the right manner? The right manner is more direct taxes and less indirect taxes, because indirect taxes are regressive and hurt the poor the most. This government takes shelter and under the indirect taxes approach, and this is raising money by hurting the poor the most. And we have all felt this. As we've seen oil prices come down in the global market, we see the government ratcheting up excise duties on petrol and diesel. And this continues on a multi-year basis, and as a result, whatever should have gone to the pockets of the people, to the pockets of industry, so that we could have chosen how to spend it in the best possible manner, that resource was essentially sequestered by the government and used to meet fiscal deficit targets, etc., but not in a sustainable manner. So this is something to be really worried about. We can see the hike in excise duties that have taken place recently. Next. Okay. So what is the way forward? Yesterday, Sri Chidambaram had a very nice and balanced set of suggestions for the finance minister for the upcoming budget. And let me just add my 2 paisa worth to that. Basically, there is talk about a universal basic income. And we have a chapter here which explores this concept. And our basic suggestion is, please do not use universal basic income as a distraction to take away from the damage done by demonetization. Do not use it as a distraction if you do not have the fiscal space to follow up on this promise, this kite that you're flying. And certainly do not use this as an excuse to attack the existing social subsidy, social safety net, the subsidy mechanisms that have been working, like midday meals and pensions for older people and numerous other subsidy programs, the Manrega, which have actually come to the rescue of people during their most difficult times. And please stick to the fiscal deficit target. At a time when the world is looking at India and saying, why did they do demonetization? Why did the fastest growing economy in the world commit such harakiri? Then at a time like this, it is important that we continue to inspire confidence in investors, external and internal. And the one way to do that is by ensuring that that commitment to that fiscal deficit path, as outlined in the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, that the finance minister adheres to that, and we find a credible, sensible way of climbing out of the difficulties that we're in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rajiv ji. We will be sending this beautiful document drafted by AICC Research and Coordination Department on your emails. Any questions, if we can have one by one. Let's start with Sunil Prabhu from NDTV.
Dr. Singh, the issue is about, the banking transaction tax. Your government in 2004 to 2005, Mr. Chidambaram had attempted it and said, 20,000 rupees, and he wanted to bring a tax for it. It was then, of course, withdrawn. Now, of course, the Chief Minister's panel, for which the Congress has not taken part in it, has suggested it. Do you welcome that idea? Mr. Chidambaram, of course, has already written an article saying not to do it. But do you believe this will help in at least ensuring that that black money that is being created will reduce further?
Well, I'll request Mr. Chidambaram to take this question.
There are 2 answers to that question. First, when BCTT was introduced, it was violently, vigorously opposed by the BJP and friends within my party. Yet, we maintained BCTT for 3 years. In the meanwhile, we put in place several mechanisms. First, we amended the Income Tax Act and required certain transactions to be non-cash transactions. You can look up the section in the Income Tax Act. Secondly, we set up the FIU, the Financial Intelligence Unit, which is now a very strong organization. Thirdly, we introduced the Suspicious Transaction Reporting System, where millions of transactions that go through the bank are reported every day through the FIU. And fourthly, we introduced third-party reporting. For example, if you buy a car today, the car dealer has to report it to the Income Tax Department. So we put in place in those 3 years strong mechanisms by which information will come to the government, especially the Income Tax Department. Therefore, BCTT was no longer necessary after 3 years. We withdrew BCTT. To introduce BCTT now, after a gap of about 12 years, is bringing an idea which is past its sell-by date. It's no longer relevant. It's outlived its utility, which is why I've argued in that column that BCTT is no longer a valid idea. All you have to do is to expand the list of mandatory non-cash transactions and strengthen the third party and the suspicious transaction reporting mechanism. So we don't think BCTT is a good idea in the year 2017.
There will be a cut in social safety schemes like MNREGA in the budget and or midday meal, etc. And secondly, do you think that in the wake of the demonetization move of the government, there will be a more populist budget, which will and the reforms are going to take a hit?
See, the assumptions behind the budget are as important as the policies that are enumerated. If the budget assumes that the economy will grow at say 7 or 7.5 or 8%, that assumption will be plainly wrong. Going forward, we do not see the economy growing at more than 6.5% over 2017-18 and 18-19. But if they assume that the economy is going to grow at 7.5 or 8 and base their revenue collection as well as expenditure on those numbers, well, that's a very false picture. For example, in 2015-16, their RE fiscal target was 3.9. But now, the Controller of Government Accounts has revealed that they missed the target by a wide berth. It turns out to be, it was nearly 4.5 or 4.6. Therefore, I think these numbers of revenue collection, numbers of expenditure must be closely examined in the light of the assumption of nominal GDP growth, assumption of inflation, and assumption of real GDP growth. Let us wait for 48 hours. We'll know what those assumptions are, and then we'll make a comment on that. Well, I would advise them not to cut the expenditure. As you know, after demonetization, Maganrega demand has increased by 60%. Why? People have lost jobs. People who are working elsewhere in India have gone back to their homes because they have lost their jobs there. And the only safety net available in their villages is Maganrega. 60% is the spurt in the demand for Maganrega. If they cut funds, say, for Maganrega, that will be a very cruel cut. If they cut funds for education or health, that will be a very cruel cut. I sincerely hope this government will not commit the cardinal mistake of cutting funds for ongoing, well-designed social welfare programs.
Manoj from Economic Times.
Look this side also.
I'll come, sir. Let me finish the question on this subject.
2008, your budget gave the debt waiver for the farmers, and there was considerable demand or persuasion from the Congress party there. If you are the finance minister today, tomorrow will you be more focused on stabilizing the economy, or to pay to the ruling party's need for deliver the upcoming elections through a very popular or populist schemes?
The 2008 loan waiver was not a populist measure. It was a response to a felt demand of the farming community, and, as it turns out in retrospect, a very wise decision, because the international financial crisis hit us in September 2008. I agree, we did not know at that time there will be an international financial crisis. But the international financial crisis, while it crippled every other major economy, did not cripple India's economy, because we had built a huge safety net for the farming community of India, which is why, despite adverse external conditions, India's economy in 2008, 9, 9, 10, and 10, 11 grew at a brisk pace. Just go back and look at those GDP numbers. Today, I think the primary focus must be on fiscal consolidation. There is serious question mark about this government's ability to follow principles of fiscal prudence. Therefore, number one priority will be fiscal prudence, as reflected in the fiscal deficit, the current account deficit, and the inflation target. Subject to that, if they want to spend money on well-designed social welfare programs, we will support spending that money. But they have to spend the money which they have. They should not be spending money which they do not have.
Bhupendra from CNIBN.
Thanks very much. Firstly, I must compliment Mr. Gowda and his team for presenting what I think is an absolutely outstanding academic work that's been pointed out in Mr. Chidambaram. My question, Dr. Singh, is to you, sir, and it's in the context of this slide only which has been put up, which is the equation between government and industry. The BJP, sir, today has leveled a very serious allegation against you and Mr. Chidambaram that in the garb of promoting industry, you were promoting one company, which is Kingfisher Airlines, when you were the Prime Minister. There are various emails, sir, which have now been put out in public domain by the BJP itself. The allegation against you, sir, is that you personally used your position as the Prime Minister to facilitate certain loans which were given to Mr. Malia's company from public sector banks. Your response.
Would you like to take that, sir?
Well, all prime ministers and other ministers in any government receive representations from various captains of industry, which we, in the normal course of things, we pass it on to appropriate authorities. I think what I have done was done with the full satisfaction of mind that we were not doing anything which was against the laws of the land. It was a normal routine transaction, and therefore it's the letter that is being talked about is nothing else but an ordinary piece of a letter which any government in my position would have dealt with. I will request Mr. Chidambaram to expand on that.
Grateful, sir, if you could expand on that.
Government, especially the Prime Minister's office, the Finance Minister's office, the Commerce Minister's office, the Power Minister's office, the Road Transport Minister's office, receive hundreds of representations every day. And these representations are not dealt with by the minister. No minister can deal with each one of these representations. They are then marked down to the department concerned, to the officers concerned, who will then take appropriate follow-up action. And there is absolutely nothing wrong if somebody says we want some policy changes, we want some forbearance. If a letter to the Prime Minister's office is marked down to the Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, and the Principal Secretary forwards it to the department concerned, I mean, this is normal. Please ask the present government whether they've received any representations at all in the last 3 years. Maybe if they say...
Can we please
just a moment.
hear the answer?
Maybe if
Thank
they
you.
say that they have received no representations, that would be a very serious reflection of the way the government is functioning.
I agree, sir. If I could just make one follow-up.
Can we Bhupendra, can we have him
We don't
complete the
know. We
answer?
don't know how many other industrialists wrote letters. We don't know how many other industries wrote letters. associations write letters, CII writes letters, ASSOCHAM writes letters. You are looking at one letter which has been leaked and released. But what about the hundreds of other letters that come every day to the ministries?
So, is this to connect?
And the answer is not over. May I also add, I'm issuing a separate statement that should be on your email soon, and I hope CNN IBN, as also Times Now, will take care to play that. We are asking actually 6 questions of the BJP. They are quoting a letter written to the former Prime Minister and to the former Finance Minister. But the real question to be asked is only one. Who permitted Vijay Mallya to escape? Who waived 1200 crore rupees of money of Vijay Mallya? Who permitted Mr. Vijay Mallya to become a member of parliament in 2010? Did the BJP not vote for him and bring him to Rajya Sabha? Also, is it also not correct that the United Breweries, which is currently owned by Diageo PLC, made a payment of $40 million on 25th of February 2016 during the tenure of this government in an offshore account? What action did Mr. Modi take against Diageo PLC or United Breweries, particularly for making payment to a person who owed 9,000 crore rupees to Indian banks? And I'm also giving details of $58 million, another tranche of $141 million, and another tranche of money of $42 million, paid on behalf of Mr. Vijay Mallya by Diageo PLC, which is a company which now owns United Breweries. That's a question that should be asked of the Prime Minister.
So, my question would still be with Mr. Chidambaram here, sir. The letter also suggests that there was one written to the Prime Minister's office, there were also written to the Finance Ministry, sir. Was these letters replied by you is the question, sir? Was there any sort of a pressure exerted on a consortium of banks to ensure that the loans are facilitated in any manner?
None at all. The loans, according to reports in the media, were given in the loan that is under investigation was given in 2009. In 2009, I was not the finance minister, number one. Number two, the letter you're referring to is a letter written in 2013. The letter which Randeep has shown me does not concern Kingfisher. It concerns United Spirits Limited, which was and is a thriving, flourishing, profitable company, number one. Number two, the letter does not talk about any loan. The letter talks about an NOC for a preferential allotment of shares. That is capital, equity, not loan. I think before you start over-analyzing the letters, you should keep in mind the distinction between USL and Kingfisher, and equity and loan. If you keep that distinction in mind, you will not ask these questions.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.